Hello, I'm Sherry Sturman, Director of Crayola Education. We're excited to share this series, Creative Spa for Teachers, with everyone who educates kids, whether it's at school or at home. This is a special time and place where you can rejuvenate, refresh, and rekindle your creative spirit. While you enjoy today's creative ideas, you'll also receive great tips on how to help children use self-compassion practices. I'm thrilled to introduce today's guest, Dr. Kristin Neff, an educational psychologist who pioneered self-compassion research for the past 20 years and is the author of Self-Compassion Resources. Kristin, we are delighted to have you join us.
Thanks, Sherry. So happy to be here.
Kristin, please start by telling us your story of how you became a pioneer in the self-compassion field and how you have seen this field evolve and grow over the past 20 years.
It started as a personal practice. I was actually in my last year of graduate school at University of California at Berkeley, and I was going through a tough time. I had just gotten divorced, and also I was feeling a lot of stress about, after getting my PhD, would I get a job? There's no guarantees. And so I thought I would learn mindfulness meditation. The woman leading the group I went to talked about the importance of turning compassion inward as well as outward, so that when you're struggling, to try to be a kind, supportive friend to yourself. And it was like, wow, I never thought of that. You mean I can actually be kind and supportive to myself the way I am to my friends? And so I tried it out that night. I said, hey, Kristin, it's a really hard time. I know you're feeling upset about the divorce and about, stress, and it's going to be okay. I'll be here for you. And I was just so amazed by the immediate shift in my ability to deal with all the stress that I was going through, to have my own warmth and support. I was kind of convinced in my personal life it worked. And then I started researching it a few years later. I created a scale to measure it, and I started researching it. When I really knew it worked is when my son was born. He's autistic. And so when he was diagnosed, by that point, I had had about 5 years of self-compassion practice under my belt. And I cannot tell you how important it was to have self-compassion by my side when I dealt with this diagnosis. Just a lot of uncertainty, a lot of fear, a lot of difficult emotions, and having self-compassion so that I could actually validate that it was hard for me. I could actually spend some time focusing on myself and the difficulty I was going through, actually shared my energy between myself and my son. And what I found, that if I could give myself compassion, let's say for a difficult day he was having, it would actually help him calm down, because we were so connected. So in other words, his moods would impact me, but my moods would impact him. And that's when I really, just from a personal experience, saw the power of self-compassion.
What a great personal story. So let's start by having you explain self-compassion to our viewers, the historical origins of the word compassion, and then explain each of the three components that's involved in self-compassion.
The word in the Latin, passion, means suffer, com means with. So it really refers to how are we with our suffering. And so the easiest way to think about this, and probably to explain it to other people, we're with our suffering, whether it's failures or feelings of inadequacy or just life difficulties. We're with those difficulties with friendliness and support. Now, we're much more used to being compassionate to others, our loved ones, our family members, our close friends, but we aren't so used to being compassionate to ourselves. So it's not something foreign. It's not something that we don't know how to do. We know how to use our tone of voice. We know what to say to support others. It's just a matter of doing this U-turn so that we're kind and supportive to ourselves. So that's the easy way to think about it. The more technical definition, which is important if you're going to measure it and do research on it, is that there are three core components of self-compassion. So the kindness I've kind of already mentioned, but there are also two other elements that are important. So mindfulness is the ability to be aware of what's happening as it's happening. If you're someone who's in the habit of just ignoring your suffering, I'm just going to carry on, well, you can't give yourself compassion if you don't notice that you need help. It'd be like if a friend called you and said, hey, I need to talk. And you're like, I'm too busy. So sometimes we do that to ourselves. Or the other extreme, when we're like lost in our problems, like lost in the drama, there's no space from which we can step outside of ourselves and say, hey, you're having a hard time. Can I help you in some way? So that's why the mindfulness is needed. The mindfulness is that we relate to our difficulty in this kind of spacious way. And then really important, a sense of connectedness. I call it common humanity. And this is what differentiates compassion from pity. So pity is a sense of separation. I look down on others, or I feel sorry for myself. Compassion is, hey, this is a human condition. Everyone's imperfect. Everyone struggles. What defines being human is the fact that things are often difficult when we make mistakes. Human condition means to make mistakes. What can I learn from this? It actually connects us to others as opposed to isolating us. It's like a three-legged stool. We really need all three: warmth and kindness, sense of mindfulness toward our difficulty, and connectedness to others, remembering humanity, to make self-compassion a really stable and powerful mindset. And that it is. The research is overwhelming in terms of benefits, in terms of mental health, physical health, etc.
What a great way to think about it as a three-legged stool to remind us of those components. Kristin, when you talk about being self-compassionate, you use the term practice. Please explain the choice of that word when thinking about immersing oneself in these experiences, and explain some of the common threads to this practice of self-compassion.
It is a practice. It's not like a trait where, I have it forever or I don't have it ever. It's moment by moment. So at any moment of difficulty or struggle, is how am I relating in that moment to that difficulty? And it's a practice because it takes some intention. We need to choose to relate to that sense of difficulty, emotional or physical. Again, with mindfulness, we need to be able to turn toward it, remembering that we aren't alone, that this is part of the human condition, and then with bringing in warmth and kindness. And what really unites self-compassion practice is the way of holding our pain with love, embracing ourselves in the midst of our difficulty and saying, I'm here for you, I'm here to support you, I care about you, what can I do or what can we learn? It's that sense of goodwill that really unites all self-compassion practices.
Kristin, this Creative Spa is for teachers and parents. And I love how you talk about the specific needs of adults who work with kids, particularly when they're feeling empathetic distress. Explain that term and offer suggestions for how teachers and parents can preserve their own sense of balance and well-being while they're helping kids who are struggling.
It's important to know the way the brain works. The brain evolved to feel the emotions of others, because obviously parents who are really sensitive to their children's distress were more likely to care for them and pass on their genes, and community members, the same issue. So we feel the distress of others. So when your kids in the classroom, for instance, or your own children are really upset, the pain centers of your brain are actually being activated. And so their mind state impacts your mind state. But remember, your mind state also impacts their mind state. That is the way the human brain works. So when we're empathetic, and we're especially empathetic towards those we care about, like our kids, that means that we feel what other people are feeling, which means that when we feel their pain, we are distressed. There's a few different ways to deal with it. One is to freak out and become overwhelmed by their distress, and so that we shut down. So burnout, for instance, one of the reasons teachers can burn out is because it's just way too much, and just out of pure survival, we just have to shut down and we can't take it in because we're just, the pain centers of our brain are so activated constantly. We have to shut down as a matter of survival. And it can also happen for parents. So what self-compassion does is we give ourselves compassion for our own empathic distress. So I mentioned my son. I used to do this. He would have a terrible tantrum. I would focus on calming myself down. I would give attention to myself. This is really hard. I'm feeling overwhelmed. I'm so sorry this is happening. What do you need right now? And I would start calming myself down so that, in other words, I was focused on having compassion for my own empathic pain almost every single time. He would start to calm down because he was connected to me as well. He would kind of empathically resonate with my compassionate mind state, and he would start feeling calmer and he would start calming down, and then I could deal with him more directly. So this idea that we're separate is really an illusion. It's not how the brain works. We are constantly, our kids are impacting us, we're impacting our kids. Sometimes we can't directly change the mindset of our kids, but we can work more directly with our own mindset. And that will help in two ways, not only so their empathic resonance with our compassion, but also gives us more physical resources, more energy. So we've got a little more available to give to others and do what we can.
I'm excited that Kristin's going to demonstrate a hands-on experience that asks, how do I treat myself and how do I treat my friends?
The great thing about self-compassion is it's not complicated. It really is just treating yourself with the same warmth, kindness, care, and support that you would naturally show to a friend you cared about. And so because of that, it's an easy way to assess not only how compassionate are you being toward yourself, but also what you might say in those moments when you're down and you're thinking, how can I support myself in this moment? You can easily turn to, well, what would I say to a friend? So I'm going to take you through an exercise called How Would I Treat a Friend and How Do I Treat Myself, which has 3 parts. So the first part asks for you to think about some times when you had a good friend come to you who was upset in some way. Maybe they made a mistake or they failed at something important to them. They were really struggling in some way. And I'd like you to think and then actually draw, and I'm going to do this with you. What types of things do you usually say to your friends in such circumstances? Okay, so I'm going to ask you a series of 3 questions. And as I ask the question, you can draw your responses. So the first question is, think about a time or several times when you've had a friend come to you who's really feeling badly about something. And think about what are the types of things you say to your friends, and not only think about them, maybe draw them out. Maybe here's a picture of you. Here's me. Here's Kristin. And then here's my friends. I remember one time my friend Kathy, she was really upset because she was having a real difficult health issues. She had to go in a hospital and she was afraid. And I said to her things like, I'm here for you. I care. Take it day by day. Right. So just think about some other situations you've had. What are your go-to phrases when you try to support someone who's struggling in some way? Maybe you were stressed at the time. Often we point out factors that contributed. You were stressed. Maybe you'd say something like, everyone makes mistakes. I've done it as well. Okay, so just continue in this vein for a few more moments. The types of things you say to your friends when they're feeling badly. I'm going to write in some of my other good friends that I'm there for consistently. Okay, so this is from me to my friends. And now if you turn the page, I'd like you to think of some times when you've been really struggling. Maybe you made a mistake or you failed at something important to you, or you were just going through a really hard time. What are the types of things that you often say to yourself? Might be something like, you should have done better, or I'm so disappointed in you. You always get it wrong. You'll never change. And often we give ourselves these really kind of negative messages, things that, are really pretty hard to hear. Okay, so again, just go ahead and fill in some thought bubbles for yourself. What are the types of things you say to yourself when you're struggling or made a mistake or failed? I'll draw an unhappy face here. Okay, and then what I'd like you to do is just compare the 2 pages and see the difference between, even though the similar types of situations, you and your friends have probably made similar types of mistakes and similar failures, suffered similar challenges, not exactly the same, but fairly similar. Notice the difference between how you treat your friends and how you treat yourself. And so maybe you can make a column for yourself and your friends, right? And so usually you'll find with this friends, you're warm, you're understanding. In other words, you understand the circumstances that maybe led to what happened. You focus on the fact that things will change. It's only temporary. You're more hopeful. Whereas with ourselves, often we're much colder. We tend not to be understanding. It's all our faults. We much more blame and shame. Seems like it's going to last forever, that we're always going to be this way. And we tend to have more negative messages toward ourselves. And then if you think about, how this affects us, right? Imagine if you were to say the things you said to yourself, to your friend when they were struggling. Would that help them? No, it wouldn't help them. It would probably make them feel a lot worse. And yet the same negative effects that happen to our friends happen with ourselves. Think about some problem you're struggling with now. Let's see, maybe you're thinking of something you'd like to make a change or something that's a difficulty in your life. So I'll call it problem X. You can just write down what are the types of things that you would say to a friend in the situation if they were going through the exact same thing you're going through. And can you say the same thing for yourself? So I'll tell you what, I've had a cold for a week that is just not going away. And sometimes it just feels like it will never leave. Everyone has been having colds this winter. It's not just you. It won't last forever. How can I help? Right? So things you might naturally say to a friend. When you are going through any sort of struggle, you can do this very simple exercise to think about how you'd naturally be a compassionate friend to someone else you cared about. And then you write out the types of things you would say, and then just read what you've written and take it in for yourself. And it's a very easy way to give yourself compassion in the moment.
Thank you, Kristin, for sharing this exercise with us. I was drawing alongside you and really seeing that contrast. Can you tell us how this can be used with children?
Yeah, well, absolutely. So one thing you can do is just to find out if a child is being very self-critical or how self-compassionate they're being, is you could just ask them to draw out the types of thoughts they have or the types of things they say to themselves, especially when they've made a mistake or are struggling in some way. And then you can also have them draw out the types of things they would say to a good friend. And that can be, again, resources for them to think about, well, why don't I try saying something similar to myself? So by about the age of 7, kids are really understanding friendship and understanding the reciprocality of friendships. And so when you talk about friendship, it's really important to include the fact that kids also need to be a good friend to themselves as well as others.
Great advice. And drawing is always such a wonderful, authentic assessment to see what kids are feeling.
I drew thought bubbles and words, but even better might be to actually have pictures of happy faces or sad faces or angry faces. It's also a really good way to understand the emotions the kids are feeling toward themselves.
While our viewers are finishing their art, I'd like to remind everyone that it's easy to stay updated on future Creative Spa for Teacher sessions and many other colorful learning programs. Just sign up for our free Crayola Education e-newsletter. Each month, new teaching ideas and tips for taking care of yourself will soar into your email box. Kristin, you have shared so many great insights about self-compassion. How can our viewers follow you online so we can all keep learning from you? And please describe what resources we'll find on your blog and your website, such as the Self-Compassion Scale and the Self-Compassion Letter, that our viewers could write to themselves.
The easiest way to find out about self-compassion is just to Google the term. I got in early, so you'll find my website, which is selfcompassion.org. And I've really designed it as a hub, a learning resource with a lot of free resources. I have maybe 20 or 30 guided practices you could listen to. I've got some written practices. You can take the self-compassion scale I developed to see, if you're high or low in self-compassion. I've got videos. And also, if you're a research nerd, I've got like thousands of self-compassion research articles so you can actually see the empirical evidence for yourself. And there's also links on that website to training. For instance, we do have a Self-Compassion for Educators program. If you're interested, that you can follow a link there to get more in-depth self-compassion training. You can also sign up for my self-compassion newsletter. Once a month, I send out a blog and a self-compassion practice. So it's a good way to stay connected.
So Kristin, before we close, what last bit of advice or closing tips do you have for our viewers as they engage in self-compassion practices for themselves and they bring these ideas to children?
Well, I like to think of self-compassion as this hidden superpower. It's in our back pocket, and we don't even know we have it. So when things are difficult, when you're struggling, you can take out this resource, this amazing resource of friendliness, of kindness, of connectedness, of support, and you can use it to help motivate yourself, to help you be strong when things feel like they're going to overwhelm you, and it can radically change your life, and not only your own life, but those are the people you come in contact with. So don't forget to use it. You already know how to be compassionate to others. You just have to give yourself permission to your superpower out of your back pocket and use it toward yourself. So please don't be afraid to do so, and it will make a huge difference.
We want to thank Dr. Kristin Neff for inspiring us today, and a special thanks for everyone who had joined us for this session. Stay well and stay focused on creativity as you enjoy the self-compassion practices.
Bye-bye, everyone. Thanks so much.
Bye-bye.